Something very strange is going on in Mexico City. You can see this phenomenon down the main straight in free practice ahead of the Mexican Grand Prix. The cars that are heading down the main straight are getting down the straight a little bit too quickly. They're almost Monza level speeds in Mexico City, and you can see why that's odd when you take a look at these two cars. On the right hand side we've got Lewis Hamilton coming out of a chicane at Monza, the fastest circuit in Formula One. Take a look at his rear wing, cut down, developed to produce the lowest drag and the lowest downforce levels you can get to get the car down the straights as quickly as possible. Then take a look at his car in Mexico. It's about the biggest wing Mercedes has. That should generate loads of drag, slow the car down. It's almost like a parachute on the back. While it should generate a lot of downforce, it doesn't seem to be. The cornering speeds are not great either. We need to take a closer look at what's going on here, because when you start looking at the data of these two circuits, Monza 85, nearly 86% full throttle around the lap. The drivers almost never lift. There's hardly any serious corners where you have to brake. Mexico though, 66% full throttle. It's not even in the same league. The tyre stress is nothing really, but look at the drag levels. Monza, the lowest drag of the season. One of the lowest drags, it's one of the lowest downforce levels of the season. It actually says the 21st lowest. I think it's the 22nd lowest, the lowest of all. There's some dispute whether Baku's lower downforce. It's not. Then you look at Mexico City. It's got very high top speed compared to Monza. And look at that, 356 kph down the straight at Monza. Then look at them down the straight in Mexico, 347 kph. There's not a lot in it. And actually, I think when we get into race conditions, you'll see those gaps close up, and the cars in Mexico may even end up being faster than the cars in Monza. So why is this? And it seems like a really bizarre situation, but actually, if you're a pilot or you've spent a lot of time in Mexico, you'll know the reason why. And it's all to do with altitude. Mexico City sits over 2 kilometers above sea level. Monza basically at sea level. And if you're not used to these metric figures, well, Monza, you can walk down the hill into the sea basically. Mexico City, you need to take a very long drive. That's over a mile higher in the sky, and you will be feeling that if you're walking around in Mexico City. 20% of the human race apparently at that altitude will suffer from altitude sickness, and drivers walking around the paddock and mechanics have all reported feeling a little bit breathless walking up and down stairs and doing physical exertion. And it's a similar situation for the car, because the air density at Monza is so much higher than it is at Mexico City. That air density means the wings and the aerodynamic parts of the car work completely differently. And you can see that in how the cars are set up. Monza, Aston Martin with a wing that's barely worth the name. It's a T-tray with a gurney flap on the backside. Lovely sculpting on it though. Meanwhile, Mexico City, Aston Martin has brought back its highest downforce specification rear wings with what I like to call the sofa ends on it. They need to generate as much downforce as possible. But that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem what you want to do when you're going after high top speed. Well, the reason for it, and we can see a similar situation here at Mercedes, the reason for it is that with such little air density, the big wing has to be used, because a little wing like this version at Monza, it simply doesn't have enough of a wetted surface for the air to generate enough downforce. The wing just won't work. The air is too thin for that wing. So you have to use the maximum downforce wing available. And that's a real big challenge, not just for all of the teams and drivers, but also for the car setup. Similar story down here at Ferrari. Tiny little wing for Monza, big old wing for Mexico City. Getting these wing angles right is super difficult, because you run your wind tunnel at atmospheric pressure that you choose. You don't run it to simulate a wing at 2,000 meters above sea level. So the engineers have to extrapolate the correct wing levels, the correct wing angles to get the car working at Mexico City. But quite simply, because the air is thin up high, the wings don't work as well as they would do at sea level. So to get a car around Mexico City as quickly as possible, you need to run Monaco wing levels, but you end up with Monza top speed levels.